Hello fleet, and well, welcome back to another episode of Epic Battles. And in today's episode, I'm going to be showing you an Essex battle that I had, a few days ago during the live stream. I do apologize ahead of time for one little thing. The replay for Carrier is a tiny little bit borked. The camera scroll and everything isn't super smooth, and there's a little bit of sort of like, I guess, lag there. And at the same time, there's some things in terms of like me moving the carriers or me selecting groups of planes and stuff that are missing. So to try to sort of, I guess, do the best I can, I've just sort of selected all the squadrons, which you'll see later. And before I get started into discussing the actual battle, one quick hello to Caroline, Alaska, and his beloved mother. You guys said hi to me, and of course I want to say hi back to you during one of my YouTube videos. So hello there. Okay, let's take a look at this battle. And well, I can tell you one thing from the beginning, which is here I'm going to have a huge advantage over the enemy team. They have a Hiryu, I'm in Essex. I'm not really that scared of the Hiryu. However, there are at least two ships on the enemy team that pose a certain degree of concern for me. One being the Kagero, the other being the Baltimore. The Baltimore, because if it really sort of stays close to some of the battleships and stuff, is going to make my life a little bit difficult. And the Kagero, while it's a tier 9 destroyer, you've always got to give it some respect, especially because they really can sneak up to larger vessels in your team and torpedo. So my plan is right now I'm going to send these two torpedo bomber squadrons along with one fighter to escort it across. And what I'm hoping to find is either an enemy battleship that is by itself that hasn't really been able to form up yet, or if possible, if I scout out the destroyer, I want to take out the destroyer ahead of time, especially the Kagero. The Sims is really not much of a threat because of its short-range torpedoes, but if I can get the Kagero early, I want to get him as quickly as possible. On the other hand, of course, if I run into their carrier early, then I want to get the carrier, etc., etc., etc. Sort of you have a list of priority targets you want. And in this particular battle, I start to get a little bit lucky right at the get-go. As my planes are transiting across, I see this Kagero. Now, typical destroyer captains, they'll see the planes, and what they'll do, they might pop smoke, and then what they do is they think that, hey, look, the planes have passed me. They start to focus back on the team and who they can launch torpedoes at. So it's at this time, with a tiny little bit of inattention, I go in with my torpedo bombers, and I do get a bit of a lucky break there as I hit one of the torpedoes and do like 13,000 damage. So that immediately wipes out one of the most dangerous threats from the enemy team right at the beginning of the battle. And of course, with the one remaining squadron, it can't really do that much. And of course, coming under the withering fire of the USNAA from that New Orleans, I decided to just pretty much dump my torpedoes and get whatever hits I can and then get out of there. One tiny little misplay that I had over here is that I forgot to detach my fighter away from my bombers, and so it kind of followed me in, and then it got caught by a fighter scout, and then the USNA basically massacred me. But that's okay. I didn't suffer massive losses, one torpedo bomber squadron and also one fighter squadron. So not terrible, not great. Should have come back with maybe a few more planes, but that's okay. So next, now as my torpedo bombers are essentially reloading and I want to sort of get them all stacked together again in a group of two, I'm going to be using my dive bombers to try to inflict some kind of damage. Now with dive bombers, you really have to be able to use manual dive bombing, because you really want to try to get either as much damage and also as much fires as possible. And what I'm really looking for is I'm looking for any target that I think is going to be slow, or just not very maneuverable, sort of big targets like battleships and stuff. And the primary objective of bombing these large capital ships is basically to try to set some fires and then have them maybe pop their damage control parties. And if you can do that, and if another ship hits them with HE and they go on fire again, they take bucket loads of fire damage. Or if I can get my torpedo bombers out there, I'll try to bomb them again with torpedoes and of course set flooding. So there you go, manual dive bombing. I've come in from a pretty good angle. One of my bomber squadrons has been attacked by the fighter scout, so it causes the spread to go all crazy. but I did manage to start 2 fires, and of course by starting 2 fires, the enemy battleship pretty much has to pop a damage repair kit because 2 fires can do significant amounts of damage over time. Next up, once again, as my bombers are retreating back, see, I've got my next wave coming back in terms of these torpedo bombers, and once again, I'm looking for targets. And again, initially, what I want to do is I want to get up there, and I want to take out that North Carolina that I just bombed. But one has to be a little bit cautious here about potentially the cruisers coming up and helping him out. So you really have to keep an eye on the movement of the enemy cruisers. And as I'm looking around, there's a Warspite over there that doesn't really have much support from his cruisers. So I decide that instead I'm going to go after him. There is one other thing, aside from me about to nuke that Warspite, which is some of the more perceptive folks who are watching this might be like, hold on a second here, the first time around you sent your fighters along with your torpedo bombers, how come you're not doing that this time? Well, for 2 reasons. One, I was obviously going to send my torpedo bombers across to try to hit an isolated battleship. It wasn't really going to need much fighter cover because there wasn't going to be that much stuff there in terms of the scout fighters that the cruisers could put up, because I'm obviously going to be hitting something in isolation. Second, it's because at this particular time, 6 minutes had elapsed into this battle, and after 6 minutes I still did not see a single aircraft from that Hiryu. And so something in my gut was telling me, okay, 6 minutes and no movement from the carrier means either one, he's AFK, which I don't think so because I saw him moving. And that only leaves one other possibility, which means he's trying to bring some planes around a border and he's going to try to essentially surprise me from behind. And there they are. All the bombers are coming up, so good for me of keeping that one fighter close to home. Of course, I also got some help from OCG in Atlanta, and he kind of sticks by me, so I also wanted to give him a bit of a shout out. Thank you so much for helping me out. You were really good as an escort, 1 for AA purposes, and also 2, later on you'll see he actually helps me out with the surface ship, so really did appreciate that. So, not much damage taken. A couple of bomb hits, this 1 torpedo hit, and I'm going to lose like a maximum of around 15,000 health, which really isn't that substantial. However, the one thing that as a carrier captain you should realize is that, well, I've taken 6 minutes of my time, or actually around now it's almost, what, 7 minutes? I've taken 7 minutes of my time to hit for 15,000 damage against an Essex. Is that worth it? And the answer is probably no, it's not, because that's a lot of time to be sort of spending, to get your planes across to go hit something. Not really a good idea. Truth be told, if the Hiryu sort of analyzed my abilities to defend my team with my lone fighter, he should have realized that my abilities were quite limited. So he should have focused more so on helping his team kill my team by damaging as many ships on my team as possible. And now back to my bombers again. So I've got my dive bombers. I'm closing onto this North Carolina. I'm thinking, you know what? I'm gonna do what I was doing earlier with my dive bombers, which is bomb this North Carolina, cause some fires, cause some damage, and generally be a bit of a pest almost. I mean, you're not really gonna outright kill a battleship from like 20-something thousand HP, but you could make his life a lot more difficult by taking out his AA, just making his life overall a bit of a pain. But of course, I'm also keeping well aware that the enemy team is trying to cap us, and that's a bit of a problem because we have nobody on our team that's close to cap. They've all gone through the southern islands, which is not a good thing when you're playing counter and the cap is a little bit sort of center north. But what I decide to do is, okay, I decide I'm going to use my torpedo bombers to go reset, and I'm going to try to use my dive bombers to try to set fires. And it didn't work. I didn't manage to land a single hit, so my dive bombers were a bit of a waste there. Now, instead of targeting both of my torpedo bomber squadrons onto one Atlanta, I decided to target one each onto both Atlantas. Why? Because I'm not sure which one actually has the cap points. So by doing this, I'm able to hit them both and get a proper reset. I do bag myself one Atlanta there, and the second Atlanta, which turned nice and early, is only going to take like, I think, 2 torpedoes from me here. Those Atlantas, major misplay on their part. With the bombers coming in, they could have very easily made my life super difficult by popping the defensive A fire ability. They didn't, so that allowed me a very easy time at resetting. somewhere around this time actually. I remember even on my actual stream when I was playing this battle, somebody in Twitch complained that they wish they had cruiser captains like this, because it would make their life so much easier when they're playing carriers. So I guess I did get a little bit lucky there. And once again, I've got to say, a pretty happy carrier captain at this time, not because of the number of kills or whatever I've done. It's because I've actually got support. I've got this one Atlantis that's sticking by me, which means I'm not so worried about potentially a cruiser popping up and just catching me by myself. In this particular case, I'm going to have a little bit of help from this Atlantis. Also, I'm less worried about the enemy carrier sending strikes at me, so I can focus sort of more on my own task. The pressure, however, is not fully off yet. The enemy Atlanta is still in our cap. Oh, and look, there's an enemy Myoko that sort of managed to circle around and is coming up from behind me. So what I was thinking here is, okay, once again, two different targets with two different things I've got to do. How about I send the dive bombers towards the Atlanta, try to maybe bomb them, try to maybe do some damage there, and then I'm going to send torpedo bombers over to that one cruiser to try to do as much damage as possible, if not outright kill him. So again, trying to split up my forces, you know, one for one target, one for the other. And this involves some degree of multitasking, because you're keeping your eye out on what's happening between, you know, the ship that you're trying to bomb and also the other ship that's trying to get close to you. So there we go, try to set up a dive bombing run here, and once again, no damage, but 2 incapacitations. So knocked out some stuff there, but again, didn't really get the damage that I was hoping for, but that's okay. You know, again, my priority is trying to kill this Myoko, trying to damage it so heavily, my Atlanta has a pretty darn good chance at finishing him off. So, sending only, once again, you'll see, I'm still only sending 1 torpedo bomber squadron, because, once again, 1 squadron should do quite a bit of damage. And once again, I've got to sort of complain about how the Myoko really didn't make my life difficult. He didn't really turn aggressively into my bombers. He sort of turned a little bit away, but then couldn't make up his mind of where to go and try to stay straight. So in essence, he made my life really simple. Got a few good hits on him, and the Atlanta quite easily should be able to finish off a Myoko with only like 2,000 health left. Now at this time, I'm looking at the team. We have 2 battleships still, which looks good, and we've fully managed to take care of Cap. Enemy team has still a North Carolina and a Nagato. So I'm thinking, okay, if I can get bombers over there, I'm going to try to bomb one of the 2 battleships. And at the same time, you'll see that I'm already starting to move towards Cap. I want to help my team, because pretty much all the threats are away from me right now. You know, we've taken care of the 1 cruiser that sneaked behind. We've taken care of the stuff in the cap. So I'm thinking at this time, alright, I'm going to move up. I'm going to go help my team in the cap, and I'm going to try to help them either gain some cap points or just help them in case they get reset. Here's a tip for a lot of carrier captains. Don't sit at the back always. There are times in a battle where you're much more useful pushing up, helping your team, and trying your best to, well, you know, trying your best to actually help your team on things besides just doing damage and killing stuff. Now, at this period in time, I've got both my dive bomber squadrons up, but my torpedo bomber squadron, there's only 1 of them. So again, I could go for a strike, and you know, I'm probably going to do some damage, but I thought, you know what, instead of going in for 1 strike right away and just, you know, doing a little sort of, here's a little bit of damage, chip off a little bit of health here and there, I decided, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try to group up my torpedo bombers, and I'm going to go for 1 strike on one of those battleships, and I'm going to try to take them down. And obviously, out of the 2 battleships, the North Carolina is the bigger threat. First of all, he's got more health, and second of all, well, he's a tier 8, and you never want to treat those things with any kind of disrespect, because they can hurt you. So, decided to group up my torpedo bombers, decided to go after him. Still got 1 squadron of dive bombers, but I'm really waiting here for the chance to basically kill the North Carolina torpedo bombers, get my dive bombers grouped, and then go after the Nagato. That way, hopefully, I'll be able to bag both battleships in quick succession and remove essentially the biggest threat from my team. So, getting the torpedo bombers together. And once again, I don't get this tendency for a lot of battleships to just very sort of passively sail in a mostly straight line. For me, it does make my life quite easy. Had he, I guess, turned more aggressively or tried to keep me in the A envelope for a longer period of time, as well as getting a scout fighter up, would have made my life a little bit more complicated. But nevertheless, simplified it, so good for me. And of course, here's the other advantage for moving up. yeah, look at where my dive bombers are already. I'm not far from the Nagato. And that's the thing. You've kind of got to keep that balance between how far you are from the enemy and how safe you are by being further back. And sometimes you really want to push up as close to that danger zone as possible, because it gives you that shortest return time and also the shortest, launching time, which is great when you're trying to bomb stuff. So here I am, grouping my dive bombers together, and I'm taking a look at the Nagato, and he really doesn't have that much health. So I'm thinking that one good wave of 2 dive bombers plus some fires, and I might be able to bag myself this particular kill. At this particular time, though, honestly I wish I'd looked at the map just that half a second more, because I would have seen the Hiryu's bombers coming in, and I think I would have been a little bit more help to my battleship, but I wasn't, so I do kind of feel bad there. But nevertheless, I am doing my job, which is trying to take out stuff. Managed to get a very, very nice hit there. There's almost 10,000 damage and 3 fires right away, so very, very quickly this Nagato is just going to burn off thousands of HP. There we go, bagged myself that another battleship. Remember I was pushing in? Well, pushing in has its one problem, which is all of a sudden, holy crap, there's the enemy Baltimore. We have a Fubuki that is trying. That Fubuki initially had a battleship, so I think he was feeling a lot braver, but once the battleship got killed, Fubuki really didn't have much cover. So here, I know the Baltimore has that AA ability because I haven't been near him in the last little while, which means his AA ability is definitely on. The most I can do here is damage him as much as I can and hope that either my secondaries will take him out or the Fubuki can use his HE and maybe do some damage, and hopefully our combined damage will be enough to take him down. The only other thing that I can really do is put the Baltimore in a position that doesn't want to be in terms of dodging torps, because I want to put him in a position where he can't dodge either my torps or the destroyer torps, and I see the destroyer torps come out, so what I want to do is I want to bomb here. I don't want him to turn away, I want him to turn into me, which the Baltimore obliges. And as you can see, my spread goes out. I'm able to land too, but look at that. It's like sort of you gotta look at what kind of tools you've got available to you, and try to exploit it by whether the movement or whatnot to try to get things to go more in your favor. So far, really good. I'm up here. I'm helping my team cap. There is only one enemy carrier left, Hiryu, and I've got a Fubuki as well as OCG in his Atlanta. But the only thing I have left right now is dive bombers, and here I made a bit of a miscalculation. I thought that the Hiryu, judging by where I last saw his strike on the Iowa, I thought where he might have been was a little bit more north. So initially I sent my bombers and my dive bombers north to try to get him. I'm still keeping the fighter close, but at this time what I really should have done, and I know this, is I should have sent my fighter out to scout a little bit more to the south, and I didn't do that. As you can see, my fighter's sitting a little bit more passively there, and I was thinking, okay, if I can get my dive bombers up there, I can maybe set a fire, make him uncomfortable, and switch the carrier from an offensive mindset into maybe a slightly more defensive mindset, have him maybe maneuver his ship. Little bit late there, and as you can see, the Hiryu had managed to launch off a strike. So here I'm in a bit of a bad position. Don't have a lot of HP, about 15,000 left, and judging from his earlier strike, even with a fighter, I still took pretty close to that damage. So this one is really going to be tight here. The Atlanta, he's a little bit far from me, so he's not really going to be able to help me as much, unlike the last time when he was closer. So here I've set my fighter in, but again, fighter not full ammo count, so it's going to only be shooting down so much stuff here. I'm trying to send up as much of my planes as possible right now, just so that if I do get caught, I even have fire set, I'm not going to be out of options in terms of getting planes up. So immediately there are 3 fires. There is a torpedo that got launched, so I can't use this repair. Down to 1,000 HP right there. Decide to use the repair. Initially here I thought I was going to be dead, but luckily, the enemy torpedo from that second wave went right under my stern. Left with 809 health, but it is enough. I've got enough firepower in the air now to be able to wipe off that Hiryu in one go. But again, even then, you still have to be cautious. What I mean by that is I've had opportunities where I've screwed up the most easy strike because something unexpected happened in terms of the enemy ship's movement, where I'd sort of gotten a little bit complacent, I guess. Sort of comfortable with what I was doing. Yeah, okay, should be easy. So instead what I do is I auto-target my dive bombers, and I separate my torpedo bombers to just, get 2 cracks at it, really, because if you miss, like I just did there, was sort of like not a lot of torpedoes, he could have survived, you know. So instead, you know, opted to separate my torpedo bombers just to give myself the best possible chance of hitting, and of course bag myself the 6th kill there. And of course the results screen. Well, bagged myself 826,000 credits, 12,204 experience, and also 1,111 free experience. 33 torpedo hits, a whole bunch of medals, 4,068 base experience, which along with the premium, the 1.5, and the daily 1.5 netted me 12k experience, which is quite phenomenal. In terms of damage there, did about 250,000 damage with those bomb hits and those torpedo hits. So quite a phenomenal battle, and one that I think is truly epic. And that's all, folks, for this episode of Epic Battles. Hopefully I've been able to show you a little bit more about carriers and also what I was thinking in my head as I was playing through this battle. Of course, if you have your own epic replays where you do epic things, please send them in. The instructions on how to do that are in the video description below. Aside from all that, have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you all on the high seas.